Hi everyone, yeah, this is my entry for a vinyl tag. Well, it's not vinyl tag 2021. I'm a bit late with this one. It's 2020. I'm going to do 2020's quarantine, sort of lockdown one. And the main reason for that is because I'm late to the party with this one. I think most people did theirs about 9 months ago at this point. But I kind of get on with the questions a lot more with 2020's rather than this year's. And yeah, I just feel like I want to take part really, and go through them. And also as well, in the UK, we are still in lockdown, so it's still relevant. We're still in lockdown, still a quarantine sort of tag in a way, I suppose. Not much has unfortunately changed in about 9 months when it comes to the pandemic and everything. So yeah, let's get on with it and go through the question. They are pretty good questions. I did think whoever came up with them, not sure who came up with them, did a pretty damn good job. So let's begin with question number one, which is to show hometown album, or home city or home state, depending on where you live in the world. Some music that originates from near where you live or where you live. And I live about 3 miles away from Liverpool. It's the nearest city to where I live. And when you think of Liverpool and music, really, the first thing that comes into your mind really is a legendary group, and that legendary group, of course, is Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And this is a 12-inch 45 of 2 Tribes. So that's that question. Next, we move on to a highly recommended album. Now, this one I struggled with quite a lot, because it really depends on the person you're recommending, something to. We all got different musical tastes, so just say, this is an album I recommend to anyone who's watching this video. It's a bit tricky to do. I really struggled with it. So in the end, I just went with this. This is Band on the Run. It's Paul McCartney's group, Wings. And yeah, this is just a great album, really. This is the best I could kind of come up with. I was going through a lot of things, a lot of records and things like that. And this is the one that came to mind, really, eventually. The one I settled on. It's a great rock pop album from Paul McCartney and Wings. So that's that. Next we have tips for beginners. In terms of collecting records, starting a collection, if you've thought long and hard about collecting records, which is something I would recommend you do before you actually start, because there is kind of a lot to, there is kind of a lot to take in, really. It's not as straightforward at all, compared to other formats. If you're getting into CDs, it's pretty easy and that kind of thing. But vinyl, it's a little bit, it's a problematic format, to say the least. And everything else, it's not easy. But in terms of tips for beginners, in terms of collecting records and that kind of thing, I would say just focus on the records that you're most interested in, you're most passionate about, and that type of thing. Kind of be blinkered in a way and just ignore all the other records in existence. It's hard to do, because one thing I found when I started collecting is I was just buying anything and everything that took me fancy. And it's not necessarily the best thing you want to do. Just focus on the records that you're most interested in, personally, the records that you're going to, most importantly really, that you're going to get repeat plays out of. You're not going to listen to once and stick on a shelf and then kind of never play again or whatever, or just get halfway through and get bored and never play it again. So yeah, that's really the best advice I can give. I think where people go wrong when they start collecting records is they're not really too sure what they want. And they watch like the 100 greatest album videos on YouTube or whatever, an article, or 1001 records to hear before you die and things like that. And they pick out records from them and you think, oh, they must be great because they're so highly acclaimed. And then you listen to them, they're not really for them musically. They might be great albums, they might enjoy them, but it's not really for them. You stick them on a shelf and never listen to them again and that kind of thing. So yeah, just stick to things that really matter to you. And I'd much rather have a relatively small collection of records that mean a lot to me, that I'm going to listen to on repeat. Maybe not on the same day, but I'm going to listen to it again and again over various years or whatever, or months or whatever it may be. Then have this vast collection of records that don't really mean anything to you, that you kind of don't really enjoy that much. You might enjoy a record a certain amount but not really go back to, and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's sort of like that. That's what I would stick to, really. Just focus, be narrow-minded and blinkered, and just focus on the records that you want, that mean the most to you. The other advice I'd give is to kind of know your prices, really. The prices of records are kind of all over the place. The vast majority of records are pretty cheap, but there's a lot of records that are very expensive. A lot of records aren't obtainable, certain pressings and that kind of thing. So it depends where you live in the world and that kind of thing. So yeah, learn how to compromise maybe. If you're after a certain pressing, maybe go for reissues or CD versions or whatever. But yeah, just know your prices. I think that's very important, because the amount of times I've been queuing up to pay for a record or a record fair, a record shop, and there's been somebody ahead of me and they're paying stupid money for a record that, you know, I can pick up for half the price or whatever. Maybe they don't know, or maybe they just don't necessarily care. And yeah, it's easy to fall down the trap of overpaying for things or whatever. Paying too much for a record as well, if it's not in the best condition. You think, oh great, I've got a really valuable record, but it's beat to hell, so it's not really worth as much as actually you think it is. You know, if it's rare or it's highly collectible but it's beat up, that has an impact as well. So there's a lot to know, there's a lot to learn. It's a learning process, and really that's the best advice I can give for beginners. So moving on now to question number 4, an album that got you further into music. Decided to go for this. This is Roxy Music. Sorry, I didn't take the covers off, you know, the plastic covers these records. It's so time consuming, it makes, you know, it really is. So you can kind of see what this is. It's one of my pet peeves with videos years ago, when people would show records and they'd be like that and you couldn't really see what they are, you know, all the reflection. But yeah, I'm kind of falling for that trap myself. But yeah, it's Roxy Music. Generally, not necessarily this album entirely, but early Roxy Music in particular. I got this album, and it is kind of experimental, but it's also rocky and poppy as well. So it kind of got me in deeper into music, really. You know, it wasn't so experimental that it was just like I didn't want to listen to it, but it wasn't so poppy that I got bored with it. So it was kind of a good, you know, a good mixture of both. And this album, really in particular, I think this was the first Roxy Music album I picked up. And yeah, it's probably their most experimental. It's one of their more interesting albums. And this got me deeper into music and more experimental stuff, I suppose. Because I was just kind of buying the typical, you know, Beatles albums and that kind of thing. I wasn't really listening to much that's, you know, even remotely experimental. Not that it's hugely experimental, Roxy Music, but it's more experimental, a bit more avant-garde than most music. I should put it that way. So moving on now to question number 5, which is an obscure record. I decided to go for this. This is something by Miles Kane. It's a local, it's a pop rock star really, and he's actually very good. I really like the guy. He does, you know, I like his music. He does, you know, some very catchy tunes and things like that. He's also great live. He's a great, you know, he's got some good albums. I think this is his 3rd album, something like that. And yeah, he's not particularly well known. He's not particularly, I don't think he's going to be ever, you know, a superstar or anything like that. But he's very good, and you know, he's good. He's a good, you know, rock star really. You know, modern day rock star, and he does, you know, some older inspired music. You know, there's elements of glam on this and punk on this. So yeah, I like the guy. Definitely like the guy. And that's pretty obscure. You know, he's not a widely known artist, unfortunately. I wish he was more famous than he is, because I think he deserves it. I think he's pretty damn good. So moving on now to an artist, an artist whose record, I can't even read my own writing, an artist whose records you collect. I'm not really super collecting at this moment in time. I'm not really bringing in a huge amount of vinyl. I kind of feel like I've bought all the records I really need, to be honest, at this point. You know, I've been collecting for some time now, and I feel like I've kind of just got, you know, I'm kind of, my thirst for vinyl has kind of been quenched to some degree, and I've finally reached that point where I was hoping to get, where I'm kind of glad, you know, happy with what I've got, but I'm still on the lookout for Bowie, really. And yeah, I've had this for some time. This isn't a recent pickup, but I'm picking up Bowie records. There's still some Bowie that I feel like I need to pick up and listen to, particularly the 90s, 2000s period in particular. Not so much the 80s, but, you know, that 90s and 2000s period in particular is on my radar. It's not high, you know, it's not like I must pick this music up. And I've heard some of it, and I do like it. I think it's more interesting than the 80s stuff, but it's slow process really picking up. It's like I'm not really in a huge hurry, but there is some good stuff that you pour out at those times. So moving on now to the next question, which is question number 7. A band whose second album is better than the first. I'm bringing Bowie up again, I've just finished talking about him, but I'm bringing up again. You got Bowie's first album, it's 1967, it's pretty awful, to be honest. It's not a very good album, there's not really one good track on this album. And Bowie followed her up with this. This is a Space Oddity. This was a reissue, but it was originally called just David Bowie, so we had 2 albums called David Bowie, and but it's effectively the same music. And this isn't very good, it's arguably one of his worst, and this isn't necessarily one of his best, but it's one of his better albums overall, and it's significantly better than this. This album is just not very good at all, not very strong. This is very good. This is a very good album, generally. Not great, but it's very good. So yeah, that's definitely, it's not a band. It asks for a band who's second, David Bowie's not a band, he's an artist, but whatever. I think that's the best I could come up with. I think that's the one area where the first album isn't very good, but the second album is significantly better, and that's the best I could come up with that. So next we have a random pick. This is what I came up with. It's Paint Your Wagon. Barely said that then. Paint Your Wagon, which is a musical western with Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin. And I bought this kind of as a joke. And as I was saying before about tips for beginners, be careful what you pick up and pick up only what you want. If you don't do that, you end up with crap like this. So yeah, let that be a warning to you. You don't want to be like me and own a copy of Paint Your Wagon. So moving on now to question number 9. Most listened to album. Decided to go for this. This isn't necessarily an album I've listened to the most. I'm not really sure what album. I could have put a Band on the Run, actually. I've listened to that album a whole heap. And there's other records as well. There's Bowie records and that. But, I don't want to be showing the same stuff every question. So I went for this. I've been listening to this a lot recently, and it's Exile Main Street. For my money, at least, this is the Rolling Stones' best album. This is just great. It took a while to get into this, but once I've got into it, I just think it's fantastic. And that's really, truly fantastic album. One of my all-time favourite, albums by any artist. Top 5 at least. Yeah, just fantastic. So moving on now to A Crazy Story. I've got this record to go with it, really, as it relates to Mark Bolan. And this is a story that it doesn't really relate to me. I'm not sure if this is a question that has to relate to you or whatever. It's not really a crazy story either. It's just a slightly amusing story, quite honestly. But anyway, I'm going to tell her. It goes back to the late 60s, this era, when T-Rex were known as Tyrannosaurus Rex, the whole title. And Bolan was very strict with people when it came to this. He was very picky. He made sure that people didn't refer to Tyrannosaurus Rex as T-Rex. Apparently, is it Tony Visconti? I remember him saying this in an interview years back, and for some reason I remembered it. He was always getting pulled up. He'd say T-Rex, and Bolan would stop him and correct him and say, no, it's Tyrannosaurus Rex. He's kind of finicky in that regard. It was just something he did. And apparently, when Tyrannosaurus Rex went on gigs, went to gigs, and they were going to their dressing room, and there was a bit of paper on the wall with T-Rex written on it to indicate this is their dressing room, he'd get angry and he'd throw a hissy fit and he'd pull it down and he'd tear it up and he'd kind of stamp on it. He really was very anti-T-Rex. It's Tyrannosaurus Rex or nothing as far as he was concerned. And it's kind of, I can picture in my mind Bolan just getting very angry with a piece of paper, or the guy who stuck it there. And I don't really blame anyone for putting T-Rex, because spelling Tyrannosaurus Rex on a piece of paper, and it's not an easy way to spell. I probably would have done the same myself. But yeah, it's kind of somewhat ridiculous what he was doing really at that time. And of course, within a few years, Tyrannosaurus Rex went at 1968, and then up to 1970 they changed the name, and they changed the name to T-Rex. So yeah, it was kind of, it was a thing that he was very particular about, and then he kind of did the complete U-turn, and yeah, I find that somewhat amusing. It's not a crazy story or anything, it's just a slightly amusing story. The best I could come up with. So moving on now to question number 11, which is a genre of music you'd be surprised, or other people would be surprised, that I like. And I've decided to go for this. This is a band called Cancer Bats. It's not the only group that does this type. It's a hardcore sort of punk, I suppose, and I kind of like, just harder edge music, which is, pretty heavy. I think this is heavier than, you know, most of, you know, even heavy rock. This is like metal. This is hardcore punk and that kind of thing. And they're not the hardest group in the world. I've got some like CDs and things, but I decided to show this as like harder music. And I do like all kinds of music really. I like ambient and also like stuff like this. Yeah, and I saw them live a while back. Can't remember exactly when. It's been so long since I've been to any gigs or anything, you know, with the lockdown and everything. But yeah, I got signed by the singer, the lead guy, the Canadian hardcore punk group, effectively Cancer Bats. Very good. I do like them. Quite commercial sounding as well. Not as super heavy as some of the other groups. And yeah, I like them. They're pretty good. And I was going to get the whole group to sign this album, but apparently the drummer was ill and he wasn't there. And they had a standing drummer, and I thought, you know, I can't get the whole group because the whole group's not there. So I just got the lead singer, who wasn't really doing anything at the time, you know, to sign it. And that kind of just made me traction. I saw the guitarist guy mooching around, and he was like carrying equipment around. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go home. I'll leave him alone. So anyway, that's that. So that's a type of music you might be surprised that I kind of like. I don't listen to it a lot, but I do like it, and I do listen to it when the mood takes me. So, question number 12. An album from the year you were born. And for this one, it's Prince, Sign of the Times. You kind of, you know, if you know enough about Prince, you can guess what year I was born with this. Yeah, great album. So, question number 13. A 10-inch record. It's the only one I've got really. Elvis Presley, Loving You. It's a 50s. This is an original 50s record. It's one of the oldest records I've got. 57. This 10-inch record. Yeah, this is the only one I've got, so I kind of stuck with it. It's, you know, it's Elvis from the 50s. You know, it's the best period really for Elvis as far as I'm concerned. So moving on now to an interesting fact about the record. I've decided to go for something that relates to this album. I think it's a record or a song. It's the whole album. And it relates really to the Zip. You know, on Sticky Fingers, the Rolling Stones 71 album. And one of the things that about the Zip, I've got to be careful I put my hand really. One of the things about the Zip, and you know, this is an early copy, so it does have an actual real zip on it. One of the things about it is when it came out, there was some reports from retailers and that kind of thing, you know, record dealers back when this was released, you know, 71, they weren't very happy that, you know, it was getting a higher than average return rate. You know, people were coming back with, you know, with their copy, not very happy with it. You know, it was damaged. You know, their brand new Stones record was a bit damaged, and it was because of the zip. You know, when the record's pushed together, it can damage the surface, you know, in storage and that kind of thing, and transportation, damage the surface of the record. So they, again, this isn't a particularly fascinating or hilarious story. This is just something amusing that kind of happened with this album. But when the record label found out about this, they thought, what are we going to do to fix this, to stop this problem from happening? To, you know, this new record that we spent all this money, you know, promoting and everything, and you know, it's like super popular, and we want people to buy it. We don't want people returning it. Obviously, bad for business. And they thought about putting things in between it. Again, I'm putting my hand in front of the crotch area, but you know, they put like bits of cardboard maybe and protect it that way. Maybe use thicker inner sleeves or whatever. In the end, they decided what they're going to do is zip the zipper down. You get people in the factory where these are made and zip the zipper down, so the zip is in line with the record label, so it hits the record label effectively instead of the plain surface, and people don't get upset about it and return it. So yeah, in a factory somewhere in 1971, you know, depending on, you know, multiple countries, there was a load of people forced to, you know, zip down the zippers. You know, probably the only thing they had to do all day, you know, that was their job, is they go, you just unzip these. So they spent like 8-hour shift or whatever, zipping the zipper down in the factory. And I find that somewhat amusing. But anyway, that's the interesting fact or funny thing about a song or record. Question number 15, a record with an animal on the cover. I didn't have a great deal of choice with this one. Don't really have that many album covers with Animals on. So I went with this, Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother. So that's that. An Acquired Taste album. Oh, sorry, I've missed one out. An album with crazy artwork, sorry. I've gone for this one. It's fairly obscure, this record. It's from Black Cat Bones, and it's Barbed Wire Sandwich, and it's a heavy blues rock album. And yeah, it's got this monster thing eating away a sandwich with barbed wire in it. Yeah, it's a pretty grotesque, image really. But yeah, this is a fairly crazy artwork. And yeah, I just wanted to show that. So that's that. A good album found cheap. It's a good job I don't have to read my writing for a living, because I think I'd go, be unemployed. But yeah, a record I found cheap that's good is really this one. I've kind of lost track of how much I paid for some records. It's been so long since I've had some of them. Not super long, but long enough to forget, I suppose, especially with my memory. And yeah, this is House of the Holy, Led Zeppelin. And the guy I bought it from in the record shop, for some reason he writes the price down on the inner sleeve, and it's got $2.50 there. So $2.50 for House of the Holy, pretty good price. It's not great shape. It's not an original or anything. It's an American later 70s reissue. But yeah, it's in good enough shape though. It's a keeper and that kind of thing. So yeah, $2.50, quite a good price. Quite happy with that. I think one of the better pickups I've made, really. So next we have question number 12, An Acquired Taste album. Decided to go for this. This is Tyrannosaurus Rex again. Yeah, not really the most commercial sounding group really in the world. For how poppy Mark Bolan would become later on. This is yeah, and this album in particular, when it first came out, there was nothing else quite like it really. It was very unique sounding, and yeah, hippie folk rock, psychedelic folk rock sort of thing. Yeah, and it's a bit different really. Listen to it for yourself and find out and think what, make your own mind up whether. Yeah, I think it's pretty much an acquired taste for such a mainstream artist as Bolan. So moving on now to a recent purchase, and this is the most recent record I picked up again, Bowie again. I was saying I was collecting Bowie, so yeah, this is the most recent. And yeah, it's a stage album from the later 70s. Not the best sort of live album, but pretty good. There's some good material on here, and yeah, it's really nice condition as well, so really happy with that. I bought that from a record shop. I haven't been in a record shop in so long now, I kind of forgot what it's like. But next is a pet peeve. Now I wasn't too sure whether this is a pet peeve relating to collecting or a pet peeve relating to YouTube videos. I kind of saw a few videos that were kind of going about both topics, so let's answer both. It's going to be a pet peeve about records, and it's going to be a pet peeve about YouTube videos, other people's as well as YouTube videos, as a viewer. And the pet peeve in terms of records, the first one is, I'm going to be showing this, it's Wings Wildlife, and the label. It's not really that easy to see, but even if you could see it fantastically well, you wouldn't be able to see what side this record is, on either side actually. You can look, there's all information about who wrote what and rights and all that kind of nonsense. Side 1, side 2, nowhere to be found. It's not the only record that does that, but yeah, it's really annoying. It really is. It's very annoying. You put a record, you get a record out the sleeve and everything, you want to play it. What side 1, what side 2? This kind of information would be helpful. It doesn't give you it. So that's the thing about records. That's a bit annoying, but the pet peeve in terms of videos that I watch, that's a bit of a pet peeve, just somewhat annoying. I watch some videos sometimes, and they're people are talking and they've got music playing in the background. They're saying, "Oh, we're playing this particular record," and it's playing in the background. And I don't know, I just don't really like that, because it kind of messes up the audio. It's kind of hard to focus on what someone's saying sometimes. It's a bit distracting. And also as well, it just doesn't really work. You can't really enjoy what somebody's saying as much, and you can't really enjoy the music. So they're both kind of hindering each other. It's kind of unnecessary. Also as well, you can get a copyright strike, and that kind of thing. So it's just not really worth it. Just play your record, play your, make your videos with silence and play your records after you've made your videos and that kind of thing. Just a pet peeve. It's not really, I'd hate a video or I'd complain or whatever, or I would refuse to watch a video if there's a record playing, which is somewhat annoying. I just think it's a bit, not really great really. I wouldn't recommend anyone doing it. If you make, not that I'm a YouTube, aficionado or anything like that. I don't really know what I'm doing myself, but that's one thing I probably wouldn't do. I wouldn't recommend anyone doing. So that's it. That's the Vinyl Tag 2020, done in 2021, of course. Only I could do this, of course. And yeah, I think I'll wrap the video up. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.